Hi folks, it's Thibaut Van Dam here with another YouTube video, and for those of you who are not familiar with my channel, I am a DIY singer-songwriter and also guitar tutor based in Southeast London. Today I'm very excited to be continuing my series about practical guitar and also music theory. Specifically, we are going to be learning what could very well be the most important music theory idea you ever learn, specifically the harmonized major scale. And this is a really profound concept. I have used the title a little bit in jest. I actually got this idea that maybe I should start making more exciting titles, but this is a cumulative series, so I think it helps that the titles are organized according to lesson number. And I'm making this video with the goal of doing two things. One, to basically show you which chords are going to sound good together, which is a question I think a lot of musicians, including myself, I scratched my head over this a really long time. I knew a lot of chords. I knew, I even knew like variation chords, like even then, knowing variation chords, I kept thinking like, how do I know how to use them together, to make something sound good? How do I write a song using chords? Now, music theory is not going to teach you how to write songs, but it is going to show you what is possible in terms of musicality, what could be expected to sound good together. And it's up to you to decide whether or not you actually want to use it. But I think the fear I had for a long time is that as soon as I know this, that's all I'm going to ever write. That's not true. That's not the case. This is an empowering concept. And just knowing what's going on, the operation of that, not only will we learn how that operation works in one key signature today, specifically C major, but also we will learn the formula of that, which is abstracted from just C major into all major keys. So this is a deeply profound concept. This is how musicians write their music. A lot of musicians use this sort of approach to functional harmony, to writing their music, but this is also a way that you can start writing your own music. I will also point out something else that's really exciting about this, which is if you can get over this idea of the formulaic basis of this songwriting style, that actually this is something that transcends guitar altogether. So one misconception I had about music theory, and I think a lot of people still have, is that in order to understand music theory, you need to read sheet music. That's not true. And actually, this theory is based on all the things we've talked about, which do not require sheet music and not requiring notation. But actually, if you know this, you will be able to communicate with other musicians like piano players, saxophone players. You'll be able to say, we're in the key of C or we're in the key of D major, and they'll know what you're talking about, and you'll be able to work together in a more cohesive way. It was just really exciting. So if this sounds interesting to you, please definitely consider liking the video. Please consider subscribing to the channel. It is the best way to stay in the loop. And of course, it motivates me to keep making content. Thank you to everyone that does subscribe. I've seen even over the new year, just that period of Christmas and New Year's, that I've gotten like maybe a dozen more subscribers. Thank you. It really does mean a lot. It's why I'm here right now, to explain these things. And let's go ahead and get started. So I just wanted to do another aside, just another thing going into this, which is I actually used this title in reference to another YouTuber who had made a video about something called secondary dominance. Handy, right? That sounds subtle and spicy and cool and different. And secondary dominance is the topic they were talking about, is something that is theory-based and it is exciting, but as an educator, I feel in order to even explain how secondary dominants work, you have to understand what functional harmony is, because functional harmony is where we learn terms like dominant or subdominant. And so then I thought about it and I was like, well, how do you explain functional harmony? Well, you understand the harmonized major scale. That's how you understand functional harmony. And also the harmonized major 7th scale is what some people call, and that's what our next video is going to be about. And so it occurred to me that this idea is so important that it actually encompasses that one. And also, I would just say as an aside to take their video with a pinch of salt, because they talk about secondary dominance in relation to it. I feel like they just basically make it unnecessarily complicated. But I will include a link to that. I hope that you can approach it with caution. But anyway, this is an important idea. And to be totally honest, in order to even understand this idea, you need to have a really good grip on fundamental rudimentary theory. And at the end of the day, rudimentary theory is the most important theory you'll ever learn. So yeah, maybe this video is a bit clickbait, but actually I feel like if you know your rudimentary theory, then you'll be good to go for this video. Now, for the sake of explaining this topic, I wouldn't feel good if I just went right into it. So I'm going to explain what that rudimentary theory is. Okay, and I'm going to give the forward that all this rudimentary theory is universal and it's a constant. These theory topics, they are not changing, and that's very important to keep in mind. Firstly, the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale is just every note that we can possibly play on a guitar. And that includes notes A to G sharp. Here's an image of all those notes, bearing in mind some of those notes like G sharp could also be called A flat, just like A sharp could be called B flat, and so on. And so you have to know what that means. Also, you need to know what equal temperament is. Equal temperament basically suggests that every note has equal opportunity to every other note. So even though we tend to think about notes in music as being associated with letters and think about them in a linguistic way, like how you can spell the word dead with D, E, A, and D, that actually, if you think about it, the notes are more like inches on a ruler. So inches on a ruler are all equal. Inch 0 to 1 is the same space as inch 4 to 5. That is 1 inch, and so is this. And it's very important to keep that in mind, that actually each note is developed in this way so that, and this is a recent modern sort of music theory concept, but all to say that you can make any note into a major chord, just like you can make any note into a minor chord or major scale or minor scale and so on. And that's really important for understanding all the later ideas as well. So next is understanding intervals. Intervals, going back to the ruler, just describe the amount of space between any two notes. So the space between inch 3 and 6 is 3 inches, just like the space between 0 and 3 is also 3 inches. So a space is a space is a space, and just like a note is a note and an inch is an inch and so on. So that's important to remember. And then, of course, the major scale. We are harmonizing the major scale today. So in order to know what the harmonized major scale is, we have to know what the major scale is. The major scale is a formula based off of whole steps and half steps. That is 2 notes or 1 note, respectively. And that the formula starts with a root. And a root is, of course, an ambiguous term. It refers to any note that we want to start on. That's going hand in hand with what I was just explaining, that we can solve for a C major scale just like we can solve for a C sharp major scale. Then there's the major and minor triads, also formula based. They are a root. Again, any note can be a major or minor chord followed by a perfect fifth and then a major or minor third. And depending on if it's major or minor, that will determine if the chord is a major or minor chord. And then finally, that last video I made, which is all about scale degrees and the Roman numeral system. The Roman numeral system serves to make associations with majorness and also scale degree number. So you can associate sort of a first note or first scale degree with also being a major or minor and so on. That's going to be very important when we abstract this concept to a more universal level, which is super exciting. So I'll also just say, if I hadn't said it already, get a notebook, get 3 colored pens if you can, and follow along if you can. So let's just start by writing what the major scale is, because this is our starting point. The major scale is a formula starting with a root and a whole step, then a half step, then 3 whole steps, and then finally a half step brings us back to the note we started on. That is the formula. And root, whole, half, whole, half. If you don't know it, then you can write it down now and you can follow along, or you can go watch that video about the major scale. This formula is a thing you can use to solve for any of the notes. So you can find out what notes specifically are in the C major scale or the D major scale and so on. And I like to think about it like majorness according to C or F or whatever. So let's just go ahead and solve then for the C major scale using this formula. And we're going to do C today, but it's worth thinking about the fact that we could do any of the scales, any of the notes as major scales. So the root is C, followed by the whole step, which is D, another whole step, which is E, followed by the half step, which is F, and then G, A, B, and finally C again. This is why I chose C major, because there are only natural notes. It looks too good to be true. I just want to stress there are notes between these notes. So not between E and F, but C and D, there's C sharp, and between D and E, there's D sharp or E flat. D flat, C sharp are the same note. That's what that whole step tells us, to go that note and then the next note, 2 notes, 1 note. And so you need to know this. This is that fundamental theory I mentioned at the beginning. If you don't know this, then you've got to see those other videos. Now let's talk about what we're actually doing today. So we are solving for the notes, the chords associated with each note in the major scale. So here, for instance, is the C major scale, the one we just wrote down. And the idea is basically as simple as this. It's basically saying those sound good together. It sounds like it means something. It sounds something major, and we can make something work from there. And the idea is basically as simple as this. those notes sound good together. What if we harmonize them? What if we stack them together? Eventually, when you stack enough notes from that scale, you end up playing major chords, minor chords, and you end up playing the key signature. That's really exciting. And so then in that, you could probably hear a million songs, which, I'm not going to go into. So all to say that we are solving for the chords associated with each respective scale degree note. And of course, scale degrees being, this is the first scale degree, C, D is the second, E is the third, and so on. So these are all going to be the roots of our triads. So we start with our root. And underneath that, because we're solving for each of these notes, let's write down the scale, but going down in that column. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. And you'll see that that's what I've written down. And you could copy this. And this is a template through which we can solve for the associated chords. Now, what is the process of harmonizing the major scale? It's actually a constant process, just like the major scale itself is a constant. It's a formula. The formula is to stack diatonic thirds. Let's break down what that means. It's not as scary as it sounds. Diatonic just means related to the scale you were talking about. So right now we're talking about C major. And that means that diatonic notes are the notes we've written down that are in the scale of C major. C, D, E, F, G, A, and B again. Or B and then C again, rather. Chromatic notes are the notes that I was saying, the deceptive notes, the ones that are actually in between. C sharp is chromatic, D sharp is chromatic. But chromatic, of course, relates to the scale you're talking about, just like diatonic relates to the scale we're talking about. So we know what diatonic means. It means, in terms of C, it means these notes. And I just want to point out that diatonic could have also meant these spaces. Oh, God. These spaces, right? That's really what we're talking about, because we could use these spaces. Again, it's like inches. So it's really, these are the specific notes to C, but when it comes to D, those spaces are also the same, even though these notes are different. Okay, now thirds. What are thirds? Well, they're relative thirds. So we have C and E as a relative third. And then from E, G is another relative third. C, E, and G is our first diatonic third. And we have the C already written down. That's why we made that column. Now let's write E and G. And we'll circle them too, just so we have a clear idea. C plus E plus G. Cool. And another thing to bear in mind as we go through this procedure is to basically remember that the later notes, E and G, we're relating back to the C. The C is the root, and the E, we're solving for the space relative from E to C, and we're solving the space relative of G to C again. C is always going to be our root, and we're counting from there. Just like if we were solving for 0, our 0 point is C in this case. And that's important to remember because intervals, they're a bit weird. It's relative. If we were solving from E to the following C, we'd have a different space, actually. Something I call a reciprocal interval. It's very fun. But anyway, this is what we've written down. C plus E plus G. Let's go ahead then and solve for this chord. Figure out what kind of chord this is. This is going to be a C something chord, either C major chord or C minor chord. We don't know how to play C minor, so my best advice is to try C major. And this is the process we're going through, the trial and error process. We know it's a C chord of some kind. We know C major. Let's see how these notes stack up against these notes, the ones that we circled. So that first note is C. That's why we chose this chord, of course. It's our root. Notice how it's in the root column. Then we have the second fret on the D string, D, D sharp, E. And that is our major third interval. And notice how actually that is also a note we circled. So above the letter C, or the note C, let's write down third. This column, as we'll come to discover, is actually the column of thirds. Major thirds, minor thirds, but thirds nonetheless. And what about that final G? The open G string. But what we found is that actually the C major chord is in fact the notes we circled. That G is the perfect fifth. That is the perfect fifth interval. And this first chord in the C major key is actually the C major chord. And doesn't that seem tidy? C major is the first chord we hear in this scale. Yeah, okay, nice, so we did it. That's the process, and that's how we're gonna go through all of the chords. Now you can see this is quite tedious, it takes time, and I recommend going through each chord in that way. Let's now solve for D. So we have D, let's circle D. We're doing a diatonic third, so F and then A. I'm just writing it up first so you can see what I've actually done. But what I'm going to show is I'm going to show the pitchfork movement. So we have C, E, and G. Notice how when C moves up alphabetically in the scale, D, so did E. E went to F, and then G went to A. It's all alphabetized. So now we have D, F, and A. That's our next diatonic third. Let's write that down. I'm using a different color pen to help make things seem a bit clearer, but as it happens, it will be very handy, as you'll see. So, okay, D, F, and A. Again, let's do the same process. It's either going to be major or minor, and it's going to be D of some kind. Let's try D major, just because I know we're wrong. Okay, so we start with D. That is our root. Perfect. So that's in the root column. Nice. What about this note here? Second fret of the G string. G, G sharp, A. That's our perfect fifth interval, and we can know that actually using the practical string rule 0, 2. Open string and the second fret on the string below is a practical string rule tells us where the perfect fifth is. It's a proportionate concept too. So 1 and 3, 2 and 4, 3 and 5, and so on. It's always proportionate. That's our perfect fifth. And notice how A, which is what that note was, is actually in the column which we titled perfect 5. Now the third fret of the B string is the note D. In this case it's not important, but it will be important in our next video about the harmonized major 7th scale. And then finally, we have that second fret on the E string, E, F, F sharp. That makes the chord D major because that's the major third. Notice, however, though, that the note F sharp does not appear as one of the notes we circled. We circled the note F. So we were very close. It's not a D major chord, it's actually a D minor chord. And that's because F sharp was chromatic and F is diatonic. So the second chord in the C major key signature is D minor. And it's because of that F minor. Notice also how F appeared as in the third column. It's the minor third, but it's the third nonetheless. D minor is the second chord. Okay, groovy. So let's just take a look at that. We have C, E, and G is C major, D, F, and A is D minor, and those are the first two chords of the C major key signature. Now, we're going to go ahead and cheat, but basically, if you were doing this on your own and you had time, I would recommend that you go through the tedious process. You only have to do it once, and at the end of this, you'll learn the formula that you can copy and paste to go to any number of other keys, to learn every other chord in every other key signature that's major, that is, at least. And actually sort of beyond in a weird kind of way. But anyway, so we have D, F, and A, that's D minor. I want to point something out now, which is that pitchfork, it keeps moving. Notice how it's moving alphabetically. So in the first root case, we had C, then we had D, then E, C, D, E, F, G, going down, C to C. We can do the same here, E to E, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E again. And then finally G, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G again. Finally at the bottom there. I know that wasn't perfect. And so we can actually cheat by just writing down each of those in an alphabetical way. And the middle column will always be our third, either major or minor, and our side column, I guess the right side column, that will always be our perfect fifth interval, or something close to it. So in order to save time, I've actually already done this because I just can't take the time to actually do that. And it is formula based. It is the pitchfork. It's boop, 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 moving up each one scale degree and so on and so on. So as you can see, if we follow that formula, we'll end up with the following notes. I only went to B because the last note is also just going to be C major of some kind again. So we have C major as our first chord, then D minor is our second chord. Then we have E minor, which is our third. Then F major is our fourth, a major fourth. Then G major is our major fifth. A minor is our minor sixth. And then B diminished. Let me explain what a diminished chord is. It's pretty simple. It follows a triad just like major and minor chords, except the formula is a root, a flattened fifth, and a minor third. Therefore, it's inherently minor because of the minor third. And I want to show you how to play B diminished because that was the chord we solved for. That is B diminished. And you can play it by playing the second fret on the A string, followed by the third on the D, the fourth on the G, and then the third on the B again. And it's a crunchy sounding chord. I also just want to show you how we get there theoretically using the cage system. The easiest way to play B is to play A. You play A, you bar it on the second fret because we have A sharp, B. That's a major chord, so we make it minor. It looks like an A minor, right? A minor, B minor. And then that's our fifth. Because of the 0-2 practical string rule from before, we flatten it. You'll have to rearrange your fingers to do this. Now, on its own, it sounds pretty crunchy, but in context, it resolves quite well to the tonic, the C, which is a phrase we'll start using as we get to functional harmony. Another chord we don't know how to play yet is F major. The easiest way to play F is to play E. Barred on the first fret is F. If you have a hard time playing bar chords, I've made a video about how to make it easier. E to F. There we go. And now we know every chord, so let's just go ahead and play it through. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, C major again, our first scale degree. I'll show this one more time so you can actually copy it down. And hopefully you have those chords and that's what you solved for. And I could have probably said something like pause and make sure that you do the math. Now, let's just go ahead and abstract this. Let's take this to the next frickin' level. Okay, so we know all the chords that sound good in C. And actually, just for the sake of it, I'll play them one more time. And when you listen, you'll probably hear a million songs already exist there. I'll do it once more, but what I'm hoping you'll do as I do it is just to listen for the scale itself. Da, 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 da. Listen for that. C major scale right in there. And then the songs that exist. Well, for instance, we have kind of tough to do in C, but that is the song Boys Don't Cry by The Cure. It's a cadence. It's extraneous of this key specifically. It's about the chords themselves. And to demonstrate this, to be clear, that song was done, I think, in the key of E, which is played like this. Yeah. And notice how that sounded the same, but that was E. It wasn't C. So what we are basically talking about is this universality, the abstracting of what we just solved for. If we go back to this process, actually, and to explain this, let's just go over all the fundamentals that brought us this far. The first fundamental of music theory was the chromatic scale, every note. The second was equal temperament, that every note is equal, right? So we only have 12 notes and they have equal purpose, like bricks in a wall. And they're interchangeable. You take one brick out, you put a different brick in, inches on the ruler, equal, right? And that you can make a major or minor chord with each of them. And if you think about it in this way, there's something symmetrical about it, and that you can do mathematically, kind of by moving things around universally in a constant sense. Intervals describe the space between any two notes. There are only 12 simple intervals at least, and those spaces, because every note is essentially of equal value or musical function, means that you can have a major second from any note. Okay, so that's a constant. What about the major scale? The major scale is also a constant founded on a root, right? The root can be any note in the chromatic scale. And remember, the scale, the steps, the whole steps, half steps, they are relative to the root and relative to the former note you just played. Just like with the major and minor triads, that is also a constant. It's a root followed by a relative perfect fifth and a relative major or minor third. So it's all about relativity. It's sort of what you're talking about here. If we go to the process, actually, of harmonizing major scale, the thing we actually just did, it was to do what? We stacked diatonic thirds, right? The pitchfork. Remember, we could have solved for the D major scale, F major, but this process of the pitchfork moving up in an alphabetized scale degree fashion, that would have been the same no matter which scale we had done. It would have been related more to this than that. So we could have done it with D, we could have done it with F, and because this is a constant, and because also the chromatic scale is a constant, and equal temperament and everything else, what we would have found is that all the chords in the major scale, no matter if it was C or whatever, the order of the chords would have followed this pattern. The first chord would be major, the second chord would be minor, the third is minor, the fourth is major, the fifth is major, the sixth is minor, the seventh is always diminished. I also just wanted to point out that there is a symbol for that. And now, using our Roman numeral theory system, we can now abstract and we can essentially associate ideas of scale degree and major minorness together so that we can communicate basically the major 1 scale degree, the minor 2, the minor 3, the major 4, the major 5th, the minor 6th, and the diminished 7. And if you think about the song Hallelujah, It goes like this, the fourth, the fifth. That's what they're talking about. That is what Leonard Cohen is talking about in that instance. And a lot of musicians make jokes about music theory because it is as formulaic as it is. And what we end up with is a formula. This is our formula. The major 1, the minor 2, the minor 3, the major 4, the major 5, the minor 6, the diminished 7. This formula you can use in any other major scale. So going back to the song Boys Don't Cry, this is the value of what we just spent all this time doing and why I'm exasperated and out of breath. If you know the scale degrees of E, we know what they are: root, followed by that whole step, another whole step, and then a half. If you then add in to the mix the chord quality, major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, you end up playing the same cadence as Boys Don't Cry, but in E. Okay, and now let's just say, for instance, that you couldn't sing an E. In fact, I'm not very good at singing E2. E2 is like a really low note that I can only barely sometimes get. For me, I find that G sharp actually is a key that I prefer better. And it's weird. It's weird because I don't know all the notes. I know the formula for the major scale, root, whole, half. Okay, so those are the first 4 steps. Now let's go ahead and associate with majorness and minorness. Major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4. Okay, so I don't know the names of all those chords, but I know the order of them. I know that they're major, minor, minor, major. And I also know the scale degrees themselves. I could, of course, solve for all those chords. I could say, well, that's G sharp, major, this is A sharp, minor, this is C minor, you know, and then C, what was that, C, and then C sharp major again. I just did it now, but I was able to do it without even thinking about it. This is the power of what we just done. We actually, by learning theory, we have now learned alongside the cage system a way to untether from theory altogether. How exciting. So I think that just about does it for this video. I think it's a big deal. I know that I'm really excited about it. I think that this is the take I'll finally do. It took me a million takes to finally get through this. If you found this video informative and helpful, please consider liking the video. Please consider subscribing to the channel. It is the best way to stay in the loop. Thank you to everyone that does subscribe. It really does mean a lot. I'll see you at the next video where we harmonize to one more scale degree. And what we'll discover is that there's new chord extensions associated with each of these. We have a C major, like a C major 7, a D minor 7. It's pretty intuitive if you followed this video and this made sense. If it did, then write some comments in the section below. If you found that this was confusing, if you need me to iron things out, you're always welcome, of course, to reach out for lessons, or also just write something in the comments below. I'll definitely get back to you. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you at the next one. Ciao for now.